do it.
We're now live on YouTube with the May 6, 2019 meeting of the OpenJS Foundation Bootstrap team. We are joined right now by 12 attendees. Make that 13 with Michael Dolan joining us. Hi, Michael. We've got a pretty full agenda today. I'm going to go ahead and post that agenda into the chat for everyone who's on the call. Please remember to add your name to the list of attendees because that's how we know who actually showed up. You can see I put my name in there. Please put it below. Is there anyone who's on the call who'd be able to volunteer to help with note-taking during the meeting today? Please don't all volunteer at once.
I'll do my best.
Thank you. I'll try to help as well as much as I can. So let's just jump right into the agenda. Just kind of going over the agenda right now. We have review new project board and milestone for bootstrapping, proposal for the new application process, voting CPC representations from projects, create process for new projects joining, review meeting times, and steps to bootstrap. So I'm going to go ahead and let's just make this voting CPC members first, because I believe that that's mostly just kind of reading through folks. And then, yeah, Ben, we do need to add that. Do we need the admin repo as well? If you can add that to the agenda.
No problem.
So, Jory, the voting CPC reps, that was your issue. Would you like to present what's going on?
Yeah, so we did a lot of getting out the vote, so to speak, to make sure that our projects, either the impact projects, shared their representatives by May 1st, and that the at-large and growth projects got in any people they would want to nominate from their project communities for the nominees. And I'm super psyched to report that we have 100% of impact projects reporting their representatives, and a really lovely list of growth and at-large nominees for the CPC post from those categories as well. So good work, everybody, getting that done on time and on schedule.
Excellent. And what are the next steps?
So the next steps are going to be that we need to actually figure out how we're going to vote for the growth and at-large nominees. So as I understand it, per our charter, we can have 2 representatives representing this section of these classes of projects. So we need to figure out what the means for that election is going to be. And I think that Nick O'Leary and Michael Dawson had kind of kicked around some ideas for that. I don't know if either of them are on the call today. I don't think so. Okay, so we'll want to circle back with them and see what they had in mind. The other action that I wanted to make sure all of these folks did was to include their time availability on the spreadsheet, which is on down the agenda, so that when we make an election for another meeting time, that it's one that our CPC representatives can actually attend. So those are 2 very important tactical next steps, and I think we need to do that and kind of move from there into the space of, okay, what meeting shall we call our official first for this group of appointees?
Okay, great.
Do we have live on YouTube with the April 29th meeting?
That's bad. Sorry. Sorry for the distraction there. So, Jory, do we have any sort of timeline? Like, are we hoping to get those voting members from the non-impact level projects sorted out before the Collaborator Summit, or are we not really feeling a crunch for that?
So that's a really good question. I think we were being really conservative about saying, gosh, we would like to get all of this done by May 1st. And, gosh, we would really like to be able to call our first CPC meeting at the Collaborator Summit itself. we have enough of the pieces in place that we could ostensibly call our first meeting, before the Collaborator Summit. But I don't think we really got, this was a little bit of a gray area, I think, for the group for a while. So and also we have this bit of the chicken and egg because we need the CPC to vote on how the CPC is going to vote. So I'm not entirely sure that we had a real clear plan.
Yeah, I guess like one thing that I think is worth leading into here, at least this was like my thought process when drafting a lot of these bylaws, and this maybe feeds nicely into the do we need an admin repo issue. But my intention, at least when I was drafting some of the CPC bylaws, and I believe that Dawson was on the same page, and Jory, I think you and Tracy were as well, was that voting should happen very irregularly. And since all of the observers and anyone who's participating in CPC meetings are able to participate in the consensus-seeking process, I think as long as we have quorum of voting members in a meeting, then there's no reason why the results of those meetings can't be considered binding based on the bylaws of our organization.
So I have another kind of point of view, and I'm curious to get everybody's response to this. We're not talking about a particularly large group of people here. We've got 5 nominees for 2 spots, and then we've got our regular representatives. And if we're saying that, really voting should be something that is done rarely, and we really want to encourage as much project participation as we can, I sort of would be inclined to say, let's call all of these, official CPC representatives and have, all of the names that have been identified on this issue serve in this capacity to come up with the solution for, the following year, which may be a little bit more normal because it's not a bootstrap year. But
yeah, I mean, I think that the CPC is also a little bit different than like what we've done with some other voting mechanisms files, just from thinking about this now is that, yeah, I mean, ultimately we shouldn't have to go to vote because everyone's mostly in agreement. But CPC is a particularly interesting one because you are doing other work, right? Generally speaking, you're not just a part of the CPC, and that's why you're in the CPC. And so I think like people being quorum in a meeting, like you have to be careful there just from like, because there you want to like what happens if it's the same people in quorum every time, and then the people who aren't able to attend the meetings but are also like doing the work but not able to vote because the votes aren't really happening because people are attending meetings. I almost wonder if like just getting, the ability to vote via email, making the voting as easy as possible, and also like a required turnaround time, like 48 or 72 hours or what, when it's needed at least. And I'm not saying like voting on everything, but documentation, you want to make sure that all of, especially if you're talking about a sort of representation or liaison from individual projects up to the CPC, you probably want some sort of record there for the projects to be able to see like how votes went down, and not to say like who voted on what, but they may have questions. And it's tough to be like, oh, well, I wasn't in that meeting, so.
I think the votes, if the moment we go to a vote, I think the vote should be more or less asynchronous, and it should allow at least a week. And the reason for this is that a week or less, okay?
Yeah.
But what I mean is the reason is you might want the representative to be able to go back to their organizations and ask if they don't know what to vote, okay? Like they're representing some other groups, some other projects. So essentially they can make their own mind, but they might need to get some more information from their teams, from their projects. So I think having I don't think like calling a vote in a meeting and considering that binding is a good option.
So to be clear, I think I was thinking the quorum being more about decision making. And I think that like because we have the proposal process that we have in place, broad decisions can't just be made in a single meeting.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
not the vote. So there's two different things. One is the decision-making process, and one is the voting process. Certain things that we discussed require a representative vote, and other things are more consensus-seeking during the meeting. And we work a lot on dividing those two things and the responsibility for those two things. So essentially, what you want to have the votes part. It needs to be, I think, managed slightly different and allow with a little bit more time. But of course, if we can even say that there is, I think it's having a grace time of a week or something. It's probably, or 72 hours, or a significant chunk of time.
Yeah.
And, I think it's important.
So it sounds like a good thing to maybe draft in a governance document rather than the charter. I think that we've got a good chunk on this. I guess the next thing that I wanted to look at really quickly that maybe ties into this, and then would be admin number 14, which is, do we need an admin repo? So I had opened an issue which was number 155 in Bootstrap about creating an admin repo to keep track of a bunch of stuff. But as Ben started doing that work, it kind of dawned on me that we only really have one top level committee in the foundation at the moment, being the Cross Project Council. And so I wanted to kind of pose the question to the group. Does it make sense for us to perhaps just change the name of the Bootstrap repo to CPC and just keep that as the central place for all of this documentation? Do we need a separate admin repo? Should the CPC repo be a fresh repo? My inclination and bias is that we should just rename the Bootstrap repo, document the CPC members in the README, and kind of just move forward with that. It seems very simple and straightforward. Does anyone have any particular thoughts?
So, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, so Miles, if you rename it, that puts redirects in place from the old URLs, right?
Yes.
So for things, I mean, just checking for things, since we do link to various parts of the Bootstrap repo for things like, the CPC charter and so forth off the website, that might be valuable. Yeah.
So I believe that there's already a redirect in place from node.js/bootstrap to OpenJS/bootstrap. If we rename the Bootstrap repo to CPC, those redirects will all follow as long as we do not create a new repo called Bootstrap. Mm-hmm. We've done that before and got bit by that with LTS and release, and it's possible to recreate the redirects. It just takes a little bit of finesse. Oh, sorry, Tracy, go for it.
Sorry, no, it's just, it's sort of circling back to, I think the whole thing, it's this conversation around CPC and meeting and getting organized as a CPC and having the repo. I think I didn't mention earlier that I would support the CPC meeting prior to Collab Summit, even if it's just to get a feel for the CPC and a draft of the things that they'd like to focus on at Collab Summit. I think it would be ideal. I know that it's only a couple weeks away, so if that doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I think it would be helpful for the time allotted while folks are there, if there could be some sort of, a little bit of organization ahead of time.
And I guess I would go as far as to suggest that this is the CPC meeting in a different name. That's kind of what I think I'm going to imply there.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's just, I think there are probably a handful of project representatives who need to be told more or less that this is going to be the very first meeting, and we really do need you to be there. And maybe one of the issues right now is just that the time, current time selected doesn't work for them. And so hence the, please tell me what time works for you.
Do we want to potentially just call like 2 weeks from now, which is the 20th, which is kind of the meeting before the Collab Summit that's not on a holiday, and just call that the inaugural CPC meeting and just kind of give people 2 weeks notice?
Sounds good to me.
I think that would be good. I think if we still have it on the Monday, we should give some folks like a bit of a be forgiving, I suppose, if they can't make the Monday, because I know there are people who just can't make Mondays work.
Yeah.
And especially too, if we maybe focus a bit of that meeting on planning the session, the in-person session, and how that will proceed, I think that would be time well spent. Yeah.
So I would like to propose concretely then that we open a PR that would update the README and all the documentation inside of this repo to make the Bootstrap repo into the CPC repo. And that we aim to land that and rename the repo in 2 weeks' time on May 20th in what we will call the inaugural cross-project council meeting. Does anyone object to that?
No.
Nope.
Jory, do you have the bandwidth to take an action item of, or actually, Brian, we have a CPC list, right?
We do.
Do we have all of those members who have been elected on that list?
Not yet, but we will.
Okay, so Brian, could you take the action item of getting all those individuals on the list and kicking off a message about the first meeting?
Absolutely.
Great. Does anyone have any other particular thoughts about this process or kind of next steps here, or are they kind of happy with what's been suggested?
I'm pretty happy with what's been suggested. I do want to just revisit the clarification around, like, the 5 people who are on this list as nominees for at-large or growth representatives. I just think I want to say concretely, I propose that we name all of these people voting reps for whatever time, for whatever interim period, and revise, for the following year.
Mm-hmm. Jory, perhaps a good thing would be maybe, do you want to put together a proposal for the meeting on the 20th? And that could be one of the first things that we discuss.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I just thinking about it from the standpoint of making sure to signal to the nominees what they should be expected, what's expected, and kind of how things are going to go. So,
yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty reasonable to think that like none of us are going to regret having more engaged people involved in the first year of all of this.
Right. Yes.
But then to be clear, next year it would be up to 2 for the growth and at-large nominees.
Yes, to be clear, we'd be tasking like everybody who's listed, those 5 people plus the impact people, to actually, as the voting CPC people for the interim, to determine what the process is for electing 2 of them for the following year.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, cool. I think we're ready to move on to the next issue unless anyone has anything else to bring up. Oh yeah, and then I guess for the admin repo, Ben, I think it does make sense. I don't even think you need to just close it. I think we could just delete it. I don't even think we need to archive it because not really anything happened. If there's relevant issues that are on there that are action items for upstream, for the main CPC repo, then it totally makes sense to just transfer those all over to Bootstrap. And I think that's a really great segue into the next item that we have, which is to review the project board.
Awesome.
So yeah, jumping right into it, Jory and I spent a bit of time and we put together this project board, which is project number 2. It's, not super intense about like what's on there. It lists what are all the things that we kind of need to bootstrap the CPC. And then, in to do right now, document process and open up nominations for regular CPC members now that we have a reasonable progress. That may be able to just be dropped if we move forward with Jory's proposal. Create a team for the CPC voting reps proposal, new project application process, create process for new projects joining the foundation, draft initial process for electing voting members for the non-impact projects, create admin repo, voting CPC representatives from projects, and infrastructure mailing lists are the bits that are left. And I think a lot of those actually can be cleaned up and closed up after, this conversation that we're having right now. But the idea would be that from Dawson's initial issue, that more or less we will kind of go through all of these, and all of them should be done at the point at which we call the CPC up and running. Then there's another project board that we created, which is number 3, which you can take a look at. And number 3 is a collection of post-bootstrap housekeeping. And so this is where we put all the things that are like essentially action items for the CPC as soon as it's founded. And that was kind of teased out of that initial doc. And these are things that, need to be done, but are not going to block the foundation of the committee. The new project proposal, for example, is one that may actually get punted to this board. So I guess in general, the few things that are takeaways from this is like, 1, just wanted to go through it, make people aware of it. 2, encourage people to use this to keep track of the stuff that they're doing. And 3, just kind of open to comments. Does this seem accurate to folks? Does this seem in line with what expectations are? Are there changes that you may request or just thoughts to add? So I kind of leave it to the floor for people to chime in. So everyone's so happy they have nothing to say.
I love it. I love these kinds of things. I love organization and task lists. Totally into it.
Agreed. I'm
Me
with you
too.
there.
So in general, like anyone who's on this call or people who are listening who are part of the projects, please feel free to add things to these boards. Feel free to assign them to people. You'll also notice that we have milestones that we've created for like bootstrapping the CPC so we can keep track of things and make sure that we're on track. We wanted to have the CPC bootstrapped by the 14th was a deadline that Jory and I had set based on the dates of people being nominated, and it looks like we are on track for that, which is awesome. Other than that, I think that's it for that item, unless does anyone have anything else to add? Cool, then I'm going to go ahead and close that review issue as completed. So thank you, everyone, for listening. So the next one that we have is a proposal, the new application process. This is, similar to 130, which is creating the process for new projects to join the foundation. It's number 158. This proposal is broken up into a couple different steps. So there's number 158, which is one of them, and then there's also number 165. So I'll drop both of these into the chat. And just to kind of explain what's going on, number 158 is the update to the proposal, and number 165 are the changes that need to be made to the project progression proposal, which has already landed. So if we look at number 158, there's no outstanding, or there are some outstanding comments from Manil. So let's kind of take a look at that, and then Manil will review your comments. This adds the project onboarding to stage 1. It combines the proposal that Jory had been working on with the proposal that I had been working on, one being an application and the other one just being an onboarding document. We realized that they were very similar. So the first one that Manil had in here was about the CPC channel. Any thoughts about this person being selected? I don't think that there were thoughts on that at all, Manil. I thought it would be mostly kind of volunteer.
Fair enough.
And then, so we the things in the proposal right now are to identify the project champion, the CPC champion, a description of the process of the project, a statement on their alignment with the OpenJS Foundation charter and mission, a link to their code of conduct, a link to their project license, a link to GitHub or other source control that they use to track their project, a link to their issue tracker or other places that they use for managing open source issue management, a full list of external dependencies in the source tree, including licenses, a bit of a write-up about their methodology and mechanics for releasing. Do they have an LTS program? Do they not? How often do they release? A full list of committers, individuals who have a commit bit. A couple questions around the governance structure. Is there a leadership team? Who are the members of the team? How are members of the team nominated? And how are committers nominated? A bit to say what phase they would like to join the foundation at, documentation of what their communication channels are, a link to their project website, a link to their social media accounts, a list of current financial sponsorship that the project may already be receiving. So that's if they have an open collective, or perhaps Tidelift is another one, or maybe someone just has an ongoing Venmo payment. Who knows? We'd like to. Then infrastructure needs or requests is the next one here, is like what kind of needs will the project have from the foundation. Manil, you said could be helpful here to have a list of possible needs the foundation can fulfill, extra points if we know how asking them. I think that that's something that we may want in a supplementary document, and we may not want to be too leading there, Manil. But that is a good point of something that we can fill out more afterwards. We then have a checklist, which is an onboarding checklist, which is not meant to be something that is immediately finished, but it's something that's expected to go through before the onboarding process is finished, and then just kind of any ongoing unresolved questions that exist. And then we have the README, which kind of just goes through it, adds me as one of the champions and modifies the description. It outlines the resources that are needed for this, including CPC support, CPC director support, and project management support from the foundation. It goes through why the project's proposed is important. It lists some unresolved questions, specifically like, should there be a quiet period during the application process? Should all emeritus projects be expected to go through this process? So we have a whole bunch of projects, 31 in fact, that are already a part of the of our foundation. Should the projects all be kind of dogfooding this process? I think yes, but people may have different feelings. And then another question of like, should projects be allowed to enter as an impact level project, or should they be expected to go through some stuff? And then we have a list of things that need to be changed. So we have the template for the project, an onboarding checklist. We have that other proposal, which I can talk about afterwards, which is the update to the project progression. We may need to make changes to the CPC charter. We need to have discussion and approval in the Bootstrap committee, which would eventually become the CPC, and discussion approval by the board. It needs to be adopted by the CPC, and we need to run existing projects through this process. Before I get into some of the actual changes in the onboarding in the project progression proposal, does anyone have any questions or thoughts?
Yeah, Jonah here. You're talking about the quiet period. I thought we already agreed in this meeting that everyone was pretty much for that.
Yes, I think the reason why it's tentative is more about like fleshing that out, figuring out what it looks like.
Oh, gotcha, right, the actual mechanics of it.
Yeah, and so that's actually something that I can get into right now if you want. Are there any other questions about the bit that I just went through first? Okay, so if you look at 165, that's where we have an update to the actual project progression markdown. To be explicit, the proposal was split up this way because we would actually need the project proposal to be accepted at phase 3 before we can update the markdown file at the root directory. So the idea would be that this 165, which is currently labeled as blocked for that reason, would kind of be updated as we go and would be landed at the time that the project progression proposal is accepted. The biggest thing that's different from here is we lifted out, the requirements and translated those all into that document that's the application template. And we more or less just have this one sentence: new projects should express interest to join the OpenJS Foundation via an email to newprojects@list.openjsf.org with a filled out project application template. The initial application will have a 2-week silent period. I think we had a note in here that we should not make that time bound. If your application is denied during this phase, you will be notified privately. If there are no objections to the application, projects will be given an incubation status and begin the onboarding process. Note the incubation status is temporary, as we determine if the project is a good fit. At any time during the incubation process, a project can withdraw either voluntarily or at the request of the CPC. So the general idea here would be that projects would apply, the silent period for internal discussion would start, and more or less at the point that we have decided to end the silent period, the project would be brought in that kind of incubation phase, in which case we work through with them that checklist to have everything in line for them to be able to join. But the language is also meant to be flexible enough so that, you know, a worst case scenario, like we think a project is great, but then we find out partway through that they've, you know, lifted code from another licensed project, or one of their collaborators wasn't actually legally allowed to contribute, or, you know, many number of edge cases that's outside of everyone's control that could cause some negative things to happen. That flexibility is still there. That would require updates to the CPC charter to create this kind of incubation phase for projects. But I think that we can wait on drafting that until we kind of have consensus around this. Are there any questions about that process? Okay, great. So with that being
Miles, there are some of my feedbacks that, you know, there were 2 PRs open and so on and so forth. So
yeah.
I just finished posting those to the other PR. I don't know. So anyway, I have some stuff to say about probably on GitHub. So don't worry.
Okay, so with that being said, then Matteo, do you have anything that's blocking landing this as a stage 1 proposal, or are your changes things that we can land this as stage 1 and add your additions in a following PR?
I think it can land on stage 1. I just added them. I just posted them as the review. My overall problem is don't lose those, because I already posted from one PR to another. So please don't have me do 3 times because this is becoming a little bit weird. So that being said, that's it.
Okay, so you know what I'll do is, does everyone agree to land it in its current state? So Matteo, what I'll do is I will review your comments before landing it. If they're like non-substantial changes, I will just make them and then give people a chance to chime in. Or alternatively, I'll land this and I'll make a follow-up PR that expands on those points.
It's fine also in landing those as questions in the, what's the name of this? Oh, unresolved questions.
Oh yeah, I could just add them to unresolved.
Yeah.
That's actually probably a really great way to move forward with that.
Yeah, there is one comment on one of the unresolved questions. So I think it's, most of those are very straightforward things, but probably the critical one is in what is necessary to complete this proposal is that and there is one of the tick box is run existing project through the process, and it's not exactly clear what the outcome of that activity would be.
Mm-hmm.
And that is
the biggest outcome for me was to find if there's any edge cases in the process or things that we're asking projects that are unreasonable, so we can loosen it a bit. And the other one is just making sure, like, I think it is unfair to expect new projects coming in to do things that we're not holding ourselves accountable to. And when we're talking about doing this kind of like yearly review of projects already, I think we all should be able to kind of go through this process in like an afternoon and show that our project is aligned with all those things. I'll document that better.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, great. Anyone else have anything else to add really quickly? The next one that we have open is review meeting times. I think that it might be reasonable to say that I'm going to drop the sheet in here. And we need to add some new lines there. But I don't think there's anything actionable on this right now. Jory, is there anything else we could do other than just ask people to keep working on this?
So I think I do want to just make sure that all of the people who have been, and I haven't done that yet, all of the people who were selected as a nominee from the at-large and growth projects and also from the impact projects have their availability listed here. And I'm already seeing a couple of names that are missing. So I feel like they really need to be, really need to have their availability represented here. I know this has been an open issue for a while, but if I can beg one more week before we make a decision on a time change, I think that would be helpful.
I have a quick question. That some of the nominees for impact level projects have not been very participant. Have not participated in this bootstrap process. So it will be good maybe if we can invite them to then join the next one at least. I don't know. I am.
Yeah, I think
I'm not super comfortable with this. Just so that you all know.
Well, no, I really would like for like I said, there are a couple of names that that I'm not seeing on this list that I know have been selected as nominees or representatives from projects. And the thing is, I know that at least one of those individuals, Monday is an absolute no dice for that person. And so, I really can't, hold it against them for not being able to make our every week on Monday meeting. So if there's any way that person can join, for example, next week, we need to do that. But, at the very least, we need to have their Tuesday and Wednesday availability listed.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna have to drop now, unfortunately, and this was actually the last item on the board. I guess perhaps Brian, when you get that list together to the CPC reps, I can work with you if you want on drafting like a welcome email, and we can include that issue and putting their times in as part of that initial email.
Sounds good. I will connect with you separately.
Okay, great.
Cool.
Is there anything else that people wanted to bring up? I'm kind of erring to end the meeting early because I have to go, but y'all can keep things going without me.
There is something I wanted to ask, but Miles doesn't have to be there for that. It's just following up on this PR. I'm just wondering if it can be merged.
Which one?
I posted 156.
Oh, yes. So that will be merged after I review Mateo's notes. And oh, wait, 156, the logo.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let you all take it from here. Brian, I'm going to go ahead and make you the host.
Thank you,
Bye,
Miles.
Miles. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye,
Have a nice
Miles.
day,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks for being awesome. See you next time.
Yeah, and if y'all don't mind reviewing all the open PRs, that may not be a bad idea. Bye.
Bye. Hate to run. Bye.
Yeah.
Well played. All right.
So as I'm lacking a lot of like context and stuff because I am coming in a bit later and still catching up on everything. But I did run across this PR where there's been a bunch of back and forth on it. But then I had to use the logo the other day, and I had to go into the branch. So I just want to know if there's any. It seems like everyone's sort of signed off on it, and it's just there's no one who's like feels like they have the ability to just merge it.
Yeah, there was only one major, not major, there was only one thing that needed to be resolved with this PR where I think there was a typo in a PDF.
Right.
That was later PR'd in, so it's good to go as far as I know.
One thing I will mention on the logo, one of the things I found out from our creative department is that there is a bug apparently in the way that if you're using a Mac, the way the PDF renders, where the yellow looks very, very washed out. So you may notice a difference under certain circumstances between the PNG files and the PDF. If so, then the PNG files are correct. So it does use JS yellow. It's not the not the washed out yellow as it appears.
Interesting.
I really wonder what that bug is. Yeah.
It has to do with Pantone colors, apparently. That was a knowing scream.
Enough said.
Yeah, that sounds like everyone here says like it should be good.
Cool. Unless there are any other objections, I'm just going to merge this now.
Yeah.
Go for
it. Yay.
Ooh.
Woo.
The other thing that I will say on the stream, I said this I think before we had kicked off, but I really encourage everyone here and also all of our the members of our various project communities to sign up for our new list.openjsf.org list, including the projects list, especially because that's the list that I send my most awesome weekly emails to. So if you want to encourage folks to sign up to get some regular updates, that would be a good thing to do.
And where do we go to do that, Jory?
I was just going to ask that.
List.openjsf.org.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jory.
And the way you find that is on the left side, click on subgroups, and it will show up under subgroups you can join as the third one down.
All right.
And is there a link to that anywhere in the current repo?
Probably not, but there ought to be. That's the only thing that I had that was sort of a miscellany type item. Does anybody have anything else to share?
Go ahead, please.
Oh, thanks. We were talking about this PR that just got merged. So what's the sort of like, what is the set of people who have those merge abilities on the repo? And I think we were talking about adding the new like nominees from various projects as members of the repo. Is that something that has already happened or is going to happen?
I was doing that. I was adding the impact level nominees to the repo directly, but I haven't gone through and done like the nominees from the growth or at-large projects yet. I just, because I wasn't entirely sure.
Right, yeah.
Proceed. I think we should just add them, which I'm happy to do that. I don't see an issue with just adding those folks, unless anybody else does.
Cool.
Okay. So I just one final thing here before we close things down. I'll just renew my notice here. If anybody has any mailing lists or any other infrastructure that you'd like set up as you're going through these discussions, please just let me know. I'm certainly happy to do that. Whether it's something that's project specific. In the case of mailing lists, it's pretty easy to do. There's no real issue with any of that, or in general for the foundation at large. Okay. Do we have any other business for this afternoon? Okay. With that, then I will thank everybody who's been joining us on the live stream, and I will close the stream.